The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Today's guests are the authors of a recently published book, Growing Pains, Helping Children Deal with Everyday Problems Through Reading. Maureen Cuddigan is a Children's Services Librarian with the Dakota County Library. Her co-author, Mary Beth Hanson, is a Pediatric Nurse Practitioner. Our interviewer today is Joan Utvik from the Dakota County Library staff.
We'll be visiting today with Mary Beth Hanson, who's a pediatric nurse practitioner at the Park Nicollet Medical Center. For the last 14 years, she's been involved with general pediatric care, as well as developmental and behavioral pediatrics. In this capacity, she encourages the use of literature for children to deal and cope with the problems they're encountering. Maureen Cuddigan, a children's librarian from Dakota County Library for the past 16 years, has planned, promoted, and presented numerous programs and activities for children. She has the unique opportunity of observing daily children as they interact with books. I'd like to get started this afternoon by asking you how the two of you, with such diverse backgrounds and different perspectives, got together to collaborate on this undertaking.
Several years ago, I had Maureen made up some booklets for me to use with the children in clinic. And then as they got outdated, I asked if we could repeat the booklets. She didn't think that was a good idea, but we should write a book. So we thought it would be a breeze. It took us about 3.5 years to get to the point of finally publishing Growing Pains.
It was one of those things that was kind of a pipe dream. I mean, it was 3.5 years of hauling boxes of books around in the trunks of our car. It was 3.5 years of no social life and taking vacation time to work on the book. It was 3.5 years out of our life.
Put it all together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now your title is Growing Pains, Helping Children Deal with Everyday Problems Through Reading. Who do you see as the intended audience for your book?
Parents, teachers, librarians, daycare people, healthcare professionals, really anyone who is involved with the care of children.
Do you see the children themselves going to your resource, or do you envision it primarily for the caregivers and the adults?
We focused on books for children ages 2 to 8 years old, so mostly it would be used by the adults.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, in evaluating the large numbers of books that you had to have looked at to even begin a project of this nature, you know, what did you use as the criteria for the selection of the books that you included in your book?
What we had to do is we had to include things that we felt were good children's literature. We had to place certain limitations. You know, we could not just choose everything that was dealing with problems. So what we did is, first of all, we placed a limit of 1976 to 1986 on copyright dates. Mm-hmm. We also...
Well, another thing that we did way in the beginning was decide just our age range that we wanted to use, and came up with ages 2 to 8. Age 2 is probably the youngest age for which books are written for developmental problems with children. Age 8 is the top level of primary education, so we picked that as kind of a ballpark figure originally. There's just an overwhelming number of books that are available, and so that's why I had to pick an age range first of all. And in fact, in America every day there are 8 new children's books published. So it seemed to be an overwhelming task in trying to get those books together.
Just trying to narrow it down, I'm sure, you know, using the constrictions that you put on it. Then how did you begin to deal with the topics? The number of topics that you've dealt with in your book is just phenomenal. How did you go about narrowing the books for certain topics?
We developed our topic list, you know, kind of based on our professional experience. The people, what problems were people, best patients inquiring about? What books were people coming into the library looking for? Then we further supplemented, I guess, supplemented. We did a survey 3.5 years ago when we first started working on our book, and we surveyed parents, teachers, librarians, healthcare professionals, quite a number of people, and questioning the need for such a resource and also what kind of topics should we include in the book. And that's how we kind of came up. They validated the topic list that we had already put together.
Oh, I see.
And beyond that point, then, what we did is to go ahead and Maureen looked through numerous places or sources of titles. She did that, and then together we sat and read publishers' catalogs to find more books, and then finally we even enlisted some friends to help us go through children's books in print to make sure we didn't miss any possible titles. Overall, we obtained 2,000 books, which was a lot of book carrying around, and then we finally limited it down to 750 titles that are in Growing Pains then. And what we used for criteria basically were what we felt were quality, plot, illustrations, and characterization. Something I should mention is that we were able to add books right up to the time that we did get published, and some of the books in Growing Pains are out of print, but we felt many of them were fairly new books. They were relevant titles, and they can be obtained through the library system.
It's always the library to fall back on, huh?
Yeah.
Do you see this now? You've mentioned adult caregivers working with individuals. Do you see any use for your book in a group situation, or do you primarily see it as an individual? I'm thinking perhaps of a classroom situation. Would it lend itself to that, do you feel?
I think from my own personal viewpoint, I think that definitely people are starting to use things in group situations. I do story times and group presentations at the library all the time, and I don't purposely choose a book that's problem-oriented. But there are a lot of books in Growing Pains that I have used in story times just because they are good books, and there are things that have a universal appeal. I did use one book that we included purposely with a storytime group. It was a book called Don't Worry, Dear by Joan Fassler. Beth read it and she really liked it. I read it, I liked it, but I had some reservations about it. I didn't know if it was a book that was really going to appeal to children or if it was something that adults thought they should enjoy.
Okay. So you tried it out on a story time to sort of sense.
Yes. The story of Don't Worry, Dear is about Jenny, who has just this myriad of problems. She sucks her thumb, she wets her bed, she stutters. Throughout the story, her family reassures her that she'll grow out of these things and with the phrase, "Don't worry, dear." When I was using this with my storytime group, I happened to have 2 thumb suckers in that group, and they both
front and center.
Halfway through, stopped sucking. there were some comments afterward, as there often are, about, you know, the book. And
By the parents?
no,
Or the children?
by the children.
Oh.
With that age group, it's usually just the children who are in there. And I can't specifically remember the comments, but it was just a general sense of reassurance that was given with
Yeah.
that.
It's got to come up in both of your work experiences, the fact that the kids constantly need this kind of reassurance, and that the books are, you know, an ideal way to bring it
Definitely.
up. Can you think particularly of any other personal experience that you've had of the effectiveness of using a book to deal with a particular problem for a child or for a parent?
Maureen and I have talked about that a little bit, and we don't get a lot of feedback on particular instances where parents come back and say that was really helpful. But one instance I can think of is an 8-year-old patient of mine that dreamt a lot, and so he thought, well, he didn't know it was normal. He thought something was wrong with him, and he remembered his dreams and became really obsessed with the fact that he was different. So his mom did find a book that they read together about another child who dreamt, and it really helped him. It may seem a little simplistic, but he felt better. He identified with the child in the book and realized that dreaming was just a normal thing to do, that all kids did it.
You've brought up a very good point, you know, of trying to reassure the child and the parent working together with them. Can you think of any other reasons in particular that people would go to your book as a resource?
I think that people can use it as a resource if a child is experiencing a similar problem. They may go to it. As far as preparing a child for an upcoming event, you know, like moving or birth of a sibling, they would want to use it. Hospitalization.
Something like that.
Also just general exposure to the problems of humanity, you know, as far as the socialization of children, I guess.
I think that one thing is that it's the self-help age nowadays, and everywhere you go there's books on how to solve your own problems. And Maureen and I don't intend our book as bibliotherapy. We're very careful about that, and we don't want it to be seen as that sort of a reference. And we don't see ourselves as counselors or therapists. That's not our goal. But we do feel that books can help children with the experiences they feel, again, as you mentioned, daily things like starting school, moving, birth of a new sibling, or more traumatic things such as divorce. I think that people use books to help children with those problems.
I think it's real important that if somebody comes in and is actually asking for a book to help them with this problem, it's almost always the parent that is asking for that. I think it's very important that they have a good book given to them, a good quality book at the time that they want it. I had in the past few months, I had somebody come in and ask for The 10th Good Thing About Barney by Judith Viorst. It's just, you know, a really nice story. And we looked for the book, it wasn't in. But in questioning this person, I found out that her 8-year-old child was having difficulty accepting the fact that their dog was going to have to be put to sleep. Because of the research that we had done on this, I knew that there was a book called Mustard by Charlotte Graeber, which deals with a child of the same age accepting a cat being put to sleep. So
that's got to be a real rewarding experience to be in a position of being able to help somebody through a situation like that. Now, you mentioned, Mary Beth, bibliotherapy, and that, you know, considering yourself bibliotherapist, but I wonder if in a way this isn't a type of bibliotherapy, although not in the real clinical sense, but if you define bibliotherapy as trying to get the right book for the right child at the right time, you know, that's something that I guess, you know, you try and do every day, you know, as you deal with these problems. Do you still have that same aversion to the word bibliotherapy, or?
Probably the word right. we see the books helping the children. I guess it's that my big concern is that if the child has a serious problem, the parent isn't going to try to get a book to solve that problem, when maybe they should seek more professional help.
Okay.
So I have a real
So you're
bias
avoiding
there.
it from the standpoint of the danger of trying to deal with something that might be more serious at a
Exactly.
too simplistic level?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you feel then, I gather from this, that it's real important, that you feel it's real important that the person that's selecting the book for the child really know the child and the situation?
Yes, yes. And we also recommend that adults preview a book before using it with a child.
Okay.
Okay, to see if there's any discussion necessary. In the introduction to Growing Pains, we talk about an incident that really happened a few years ago. We frequently have daycare groups visiting the library. You know, just the whole group comes in, they select some books, and they take them back to the daycare center or the daycare home. And oftentimes what they will do is they will pick out a book and read it to the children while they are at the library.
Okay.
Okay, this group came in, they picked out the book The Accident by Carol Carrick, and they read the book. Now, the main incident in this story involves a young boy seeing his dog run over by a truck, and these children were all upset.
It could be kind of devastating for them if they weren't prepared.
Yes, and you know, if she had known what the topic was, then she could have prepared them, maybe done some discussion, or she could have chosen to read The Foundling by the same author, in which the boy resolves his grief.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a good point, I think. And I think throughout your book, you've brought up the idea that it's one thing to select the book and enjoy it and read it with the children, but the follow-up is so critical to the whole process of using books for children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why do you feel that's particularly relevant? Do you think that you want to use the kids as a sounding board to see if the, you know, what their impressions of it are? That gives you a chance to kind of talk through a problem with them? And
well, I think maybe that goes back to our distinction as far as bibliotherapy. The book doesn't, no book solves any problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the books can open avenues of communication.
for the parent and
Yes,
the child together,
yes.
or whatever. Yeah. Well, this happens every day in a family setting, and one of your chapters addresses the family in particular. Would you want to elaborate just a little bit on the chapter on the family, some of the topics or the introductions that you have to the various topics and the related articles and so forth? Would that be a good chapter to maybe?
I think so, yeah. The chapter on family is it is representative of all the chapters in our book. They're all basically laid out the same way. There's the introduction, which explains why the subject is relevant to children and how children's literature can help the child deal with problems in that area. We hope people read those. They're very important to us, and we spend a lot of time on them.
Mary Beth
well-
is very, we discovered after working, I'm sorry to interrupt here, we discovered after working together for so many years that, you know, she had a real gift for writing the chapter introductions. We slaved over 8 or 9 of them together, and then she did the last 4, just whipped them off by herself. So.
Exactly. Maureen excelled in doing the annotations, but we were a good team. Anyway, then as far as so there's the introduction, then there's a list of topics, list of subtopics within that chapter, the annotations, which have the bibliographic material and discuss the book and perhaps indicate how it can be used. There's also a list of related titles at the end of the chapter. Those are books that maybe have a different main theme, are found elsewhere in the book, but we feel are relevant to the subject that they're listed after as additional titles. Excuse me. Oh, there was something else. Oh, The other thing is that this is not part of that chapter, but as far as how the book is laid out, is that at the end there's a subject, author, and title, and indexes, which we think are very helpful, and we try to make them very easy for people to use. So
the whole layout of the book, I think, is very usable, the way you've addressed the various topics, but as you mentioned, that subject index in particular, you go into such depth, because some of the books, you know, really do have a main focus, but they deal with other related problems as they go through, and so to pull those out in your related topics, I think is a, you know, is a particular help to people. Now, you know, I wonder if your book isn't kind of a sign of the times. You think even a generation ago, first of all, you wouldn't have young children maybe dealing with the diversity of problems that they seem to have to deal with now. And do you feel too that maybe there wasn't available such a wide range of problem-oriented books? Do you think books themselves have become more realistic?
I think possibly, I'm just kind of groping here. I think possibly it was in the 70s that a lot of the taboos as far as discussion, not necessarily discussion, but books dealing with certain topics were lifted as far as children's literature is concerned. And that was when we saw kind of a new rash of realistic books. With our age range, it kind of took a while to work down to the younger picture book level.
Sure.
And so 76 to 86 was a real good decade to choose to include, because I think that a lot of the things that were written prior to that tended to be quite didactic.
yes, our favorite word.
Yeah, well, either that or real simplistic in their approach to a given problem.
They could be real condescending, and Maureen and I both felt very strongly that the books we included should be respectful of children. That was something we really cared about.
Well, there's an awful lot of pressures on kids, and as you point out, Maureen, at a much earlier age, it seems. I think the fact that you've included a number of board books in there, you know, is just phenomenal. To think that even in the board book stage, that these problems are being addressed. For the most part, you tend to use fiction, although there are a few non-fiction titles. You know, was that a conscious choice that you tended to stress the fiction as far as books being enjoyable and so forth for the kids, or was it just the literature that you found?
I think that we just basically, we took all the titles we could find on a subject and read them.
Oh.
Bottom line, and we picked the best that we, picked the ones that we felt were best to include in the chapter, and it turned out that most of them were fiction, but we do have the non-fiction that we felt were of good quality.
Yes, we had, you know, it's just amazing the number of titles we requested from Hennepin County Library and Dakota County Library.
Yeah.
Just
In order to be
endless,
able to just
endless
survey the
numbers.
books
Right.
yourselves.
Yes.
Huh? Yeah. Well, you said you looked at over 2,000 and culled from that 750. So that in itself is an undertaking, I think, to have gone through all of those. I'm just wondering, you know, like when I was talking about fiction and nonfiction, I'm thinking particularly of biographies, and again, probably just the age level that you tend to address. You don't see quite as much biography. I'm thinking that that would be another good way for children to be able to see themselves, or to see someone that was coping with a problem that had perhaps the same handicaps they did coming into it, or the same situation, being able to see themselves and see these people overcome it. But I guess at the, you know, as you say, your focus was 2 to 8 years old.
We have one biography in there. It's about Deborah Sampson, in the sexual equality chapter. That's it. That's
Women shall overcome.
Eventually.
Okay. You talked a little bit, Mary Beth, about you know, doing the book lists and deciding on a, you know, finally putting it together into a book as such. Have you envisioned a sequel to this, or is that just beyond your comprehension at this point? The idea of updating or going on with this?
We've talked about it, and I think if there's enough of a need, I think that people find enough of a need to use our book, it serves its purpose in helping children, then we might be open to talking about it.
Yeah.
But right now, that's way out of line for us.
You can't even think of it. Huh?
No, no,
You know, it doesn't seem like it's been over for very long.
it hasn't.
It hasn't.
Yeah. Well, when you're immersed in it for so long, I'm sure that, you know, just a breather is
Right.
a welcome. My other thought is perhaps branching off into a whole different avenue and leaving the children behind and coming out with a book for adults, helping us to cope with some of the problems that we confront in everyday life. Are you up to that?
I think we're stuck with children. That's kind of our area of expertise.
Oh, okay. The growing pains? Huh? Does the title mean anything more than what it appears?
Well, we've talked about that, and I think it exemplifies the struggles that children have in growing up and facing the problems that they have to deal with in their young lives. It has a personal meaning for us, I think, for the struggles we went through in writing the book, but basically that's it.
You consider it a growth period for the two of
Definitely.
you working
Right.
together, huh?
Yes, it was really interesting how when we first started working on the book, we'd have these piles and piles of books, Beth like this, I like this, and by the time we had worked for 3.5 years, the same books were making us laugh and cry, and the same books were touching both of us.
Oh, so you're beginning to kind of zero in on things together, huh?
Yes.
The big
yes.
thing for me, and I think it's true for parents too, is just you need to read a lot to understand what good literature is. And so when we started out, I'd always be running to Maureen, is this good, is this good? And in time, I got real comfortable at deciding what I thought was quality literature, and indeed it was things that we then came to agree upon.
Making
You need
those
to read a lot.
decisions.
Parents need to read a lot so they know what works with their children too.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being with us. It's been a pleasure talking and visiting with both of you.
Growing Pains, a book which packs a lot of information for librarians, parents, teachers, child care providers, any other adult working with children. Look for it in your local library or bookstore. Thanks for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.